Hi guys, welcome to the second part of the Genoma rigging tutorial. This tutorial is all about animation. Now I'm a noob when it comes to animating, but hopefully I can show you the tools and the processes to get you started. So there's a lot to cover, let's get stuck into it. If you manage to download any of the objects that I suggested in my Genoma rigging tutorial, when you load them up you'll find that they come in tripled or with 3-point polygons as opposed to quad polygons, which are 4-point polygons. Now if you're like me and you hate working with 3-point polygons or a tripled object, go over to the Lightwave plugins database and download this plugin Merge Trigons X 64-bit version and a 32-bit version. Install that. I've just added it here to my Genoma tab under the World section. Okay, it's just simply click on that and it converts your object to quads as best as it can, and hit tab to make it subpatch and save it out. Now let's take a look at setting up a scene for animating our characters. To start off with, hit D for display, and under the general tab what we want to do is have a look at a few of these settings. Now first up, you want to have double click bone mode selected. Okay, under that you want to set up your frame rate. In my case it's PAL, so it's 25 frames. You could use 24, 30, up to you. Under that we've got play exact rate. You want to make sure that that's checked for our previews. I've got it set to metric for the units, and for the default unit I've set it to centimeters. Normally I've got it set to meters, but for animating setting it to centimeters just makes it a lot easier. If we go to the display tab, now up here where you've got viewport layout, we're going to be changing that, but I'll show you how to do that. We'll use the F3 and F4 keys. We'll toggle between those to change that. Grid type, you can set that to whatever makes you comfortable. As far as the grid square size, we'll be changing that, but we'll be using a left and right brackets as shortcuts to do that, which relates to the display down here in the bottom corner. If we go over to GL, just make sure you've got motion paths checked, show frame markers, show keyframes, as well as show IK chains and show target lines. It's up to you if you want to have them on. You don't really need them. That's pretty much it for this page, so we'll just close that off. Okay, so now let's load in an object. We'll load up our puppet character, which you'll find in the content for the Genoma rigging tutorial. I'll also place a link in the description for the content, but we'll select puppet rigged. We'll open that and we'll go to setup and we'll create rig. It's a pretty simple object, so there's no need to go into bounding box mode. Next up, I'm going to open up my scene editor, and I've got that set to a keyboard shortcut of X. The next thing I do is I turn off the visibility for the light and the camera. And the reason I do that is when I hit A to fit all, it's not trying to fit the camera and the light in. If I turn them back on and hit A, you'll notice it fits the camera and the light as well. So just turn the visibility off of those, hit A. Next thing you want to do is go up here and just make sure you got headlight on. What that does is it just creates a light that lights up the object from all angles. And I'm going to also go up there and turn bone X-ray off. Don't really need to see our bones, we know they work. Now I'm going to change different views. I'm going to hit the 1 key for front, 2 is for top, 3 is for side, 4 is for perspective, 5 is for your light, and 6 is for your camera. Okay, get used to those, come in very handy. So we'll go into the 1 front view, and now let's just make some changes to our object here. But before we do that, let's decrease the size of our grid just so that we've got a bit more precise control. And the way we do that is just left bracket, and if you look down here in the bottom left corner, you'll see as you increase or decrease it, it displays the grid size. Set it to 5 centimeters and hit A to fit the screen. Next up, I want to grab these arm controllers because they've come in and they're tiny, and that's difficult to select. So we'll select both of those, and I'm going to go into the scale, not stretch like I always say, scale. Shift H is scale, H is stretch. I always get them wrong, but I think you know what I mean. So I've scaled them up. Now what I want to do is I want to grab these arms and I want to position them by the side of my character. We'll type in 10 centimeters, round it off to 20 centimeters, and we'll make the Z 0. I'm going to switch to rotation mode, and the way I switch is using my middle mouse scroll wheel, and I'm just going to grab the bank and just move it. I'm going to do the same to this arm. What I like to do is when I position the different controllers, I like to go in and try to round off the numbers just so that it's a little bit easier to see and work with. Okay, so that's what I've done with the arm controllers. I've got them set up to the side of our character. Next I'm going to grab these elbow controls and just move them in a little bit. And in the side view, number 3, grab the knee controllers and just move them out in front. Next up, I'll grab this master null and I'll hit X for the scene editor, and I'm going to hide it so it doesn't get in the way. Now it's not in the way, and if we go into a side view, we don't have that big null in the way of our feet controllers. Now I want to split the views to double vertical. Like I said earlier, you can do it in the display options up here, viewport layout, double vertical, or if you hit F4 and you can go back, F3, you can toggle through all the different views. And much like Modeler, if you hover your mouse over the top of a particular viewport and hit the 0 key, it maximizes it, and hit it again and it goes back to a double view. I'm going to hit A to fit all, bone, X-ray and headlight to match our other viewport. Now real quick, if we go back to the front view, I noticed the knee controllers were in a little bit too much. I'm just going to move them out. Now that we have our character all set up, let's take a look at creating some selection sets. Selection sets are used to select multiple objects with one click rather than going in and trying to select a whole bunch of different controllers. Now if you look down here, this little tiny button here to the left of the properties and to the right of the current item, it's tiny, it's hidden. Select that. This is our current item objects. What we can do is we can go over here where it says selection and we can create a set. Okay. Now before we create a set, we actually have to select the controllers we want to set. Alternatively, if you go to scene editor, up here you've got sets. You can do the same thing. You can go through and select all your different controllers and save a selection. I much prefer to do it in this little window here. So let's go ahead and make some selections. But first up, we'll come in here and we need to grab, you might not be able to see it, let's just go into bounding box. Right in here, let's maximize this little yellow controller, which is our toe controller. Okay, if we select the pitch for it, it controls our toe. I want to hit P for properties, and under geometry for item shape, I'm going to change that to box, and I'm going to make that 4 centimeters. And I'm going to close that, and I'm going to do the same for the other one. It makes it so much easier to select. Okay, we've got them set up. Now let's go ahead and make some selection sets. First up, I'm going to grab both of these toes. I'm going to click on that little icon and selection create set. Brings up this dialog box, and we'll just type in toes and hit OK. Now when we go into the selection, you'll see it here, toes. Okay, we'll just deselect. While we're here, we'll just grab the feet and we'll make one, create set feet. Let's just zoom out and let's grab the arms. Okay, and let's make a selection. We'll call them arms and hit OK. And lastly, we'll grab the right leg control and the right toe control and the left hand control and create a selection, call it offset, and I'll show you what that's all about in a second. So now we've got all our selection sets. Close it off, save the scene, saves those selections, and we're almost ready to animate. Now for this animation we're going to be creating a loopable walk cycle. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to set the duration of this walk cycle. If you position your mouse over the top of the center of this timeline and click, it opens up the dope track, and what we can do is we can edit our keys in here by left click and dragging. It brings up a handle and we can move them around. Alternatively, we can just right click and we can use any of these options here. Okay, so I'll just delete that. And to create keys, we hit enter and enter again. What we can also do is we can copy keys. Say we wanted to copy this 0 to 20, we hit enter, type in 20, and now we've copied that key here. So we'll be using that to copy keys for our walk cycle. Now as far as the duration is concerned, it's totally up to you, but a run cycle is roughly about 20 odd frames. A reasonably casual slow walk is around 40 frames. Okay, but it really doesn't matter what you set it at, because we can always go in and we can increase or decrease the duration. Okay, so for this example I'm going to set the timeline to 40 frames. It just makes it easier. 10, 20, 30, 40. I don't have to think too much. So 40 frames is what we've got set up. Now next thing I want to do is I want to create some markers so that I know where my major pose keyframes are. So we'll start off with 0. We'll just right click on there and add marker. I'm going to go over to 10. I'm going to add a marker there. Going to go to 20. Okay, so now I've got my markers in there, and what that does is when you put the playback head on that key, it lights up a little yellow marker for us, letting us know that we're on there. So we're going to be using these keys for our major poses. Now before we start animating, I want to go over these auto key options. If we click on it, we've got auto key off, modified, all channels, and existing. By default it's set to all channels. Now to get a better representation of what's going on, now would be a great time to introduce the graph editor. Now the graph editor can be found up here, top left corner. Now I've got mine set to a keyboard shortcut of G. So if I hit G on the keyboard, it brings up my graph editor. Now if I click off the graph editor and hit G again, it closes it. Now in the graph editor, you'll find all the channels relating to the controller, or all the controllers that you're animating. Now when you're using the graph editor and you change from one controller to the next, you actually have to close off the graph editor and bring it up again, so that now we're actually looking at the channels for that particular controller. Now if we select both of these foot controllers, hit G and then hit G again, now all the channels for both of those foot controllers have come up. So then we can take a look at all the keys and we can adjust them here in the graph editor. Now the main purpose of the graph editor is so that we can edit any keys that we create. If I move down the timeline and just hit enter and create a key, I've now created a key here for all the different channels. Okay, we can just select it by right click and dragging over it, and we can hit delete. Now in order to select all the channels here in the graph editor, what I've always done, shift click to select all of the channels, and inside the graph editor I hit A to fit all, and then with the right mouse button I would select them all and then make my changes. Alternatively, you can go up to selection and select all curves in bin, the shortcut for that is Control arrow up, and that's what I'll be using a lot of, or I'll just go in and do a shift click because that's what I'm used to doing. And that way what we can do is we can edit all the different keys in all the channels at once. Or alternatively, we can just click on one of them and using the arrow go up and down through each one of the channels and make our changes. To navigate in the graph editor, if we select all our channels, while we've got our mouse cursor hovering over the graph window, if we hit A, that selects all. If we select one of the keys, right click and drag and hit Shift A, that will zoom in to the selected. The other way to navigate in here is to hold the Alt key down and left mouse button to move around, and if you hold the Control and Alt, that allows us to zoom. If you go up and down, left and right. Now down the bottom here we've got frame and value. These come in super handy. Say for example we grab all these keys and we don't want them to be at 0, we want them to be at 10. We can just type in 10, and now all these keys are at 10. Bring them back to 0, or we can just use the slider. Okay, or you can hold Control down and left mouse button and you can move it left and right. Under that we've got the value, but we can control each individual value for each individual key. And to the right of that we have our incoming curve, which is by default TCB spline. We'll be using that as well as linear. Now directly underneath that is the tension, and what the tension is basically easing in and easing out. We'll see a lot more of this as we go along. Now let's take a closer look at our order key. Now by default, like I said earlier, it's set to all channels. Let's bring up our graph editor and have a look at what's going on. Now if I move down the timeline and I've got the main route selected, I'm just going to move it, and if we select all the keys, hit A, you'll notice now that keys have been created on all the channels if we go through them. Okay, so that's what happens when you set auto key to all channels. No matter what movements you make, a key will be created for each and every one of these channels. Now let's take a look at auto key off. Now once again, if we move down the timeline and we move our character around, you'll notice that no keys have been made, and if I move the timeline, he pops back to his original position. And when it comes to using auto key off, we have to go in, create keys manually, and to do that we hit enter, and you've got the choice of all the different channels that you can create a key for. Now if I've got them all selected and hit OK, you'll notice now that I've got keys in all the channels. Now what you can do is you can actually go in, and let's just say we're moving in the Z and in the Y. Okay, now we need to create keys manually. What we can do is if you click on scale, rotation, position, it turns off all the channels, and we can go in there individually and choose which channels we want keys to be created on. For example, I moved it in the Z and the Y, so we hit OK. And you'll notice now in the graph editor that we've got, let's have a look, in the X there's no keys, in the Y there's a key, in the Z there's a key, and all the rest of the channels there isn't. So you can be very, very specific about what channels you want keys on. Personally, I don't recommend using auto key off, because there's nothing worse than moving up the timeline and making a whole bunch of different changes, spending a whole lot of time doing it, and actually forgetting to hit enter and moving the timeline for it to pop back. I'd rather keep it on all channels and delete keys if I had to. Next up is auto key modified, and the way this works is if we move down the timeline and I grab the Z and I move it, you'll notice that nothing's happened. But if we go to the Z channel, there is a key in there. So if we select them all, you'll see that a key has only been made on the actual channel that has been manipulated with our character. Now if I grab that, the same character, and rotate it, you'll notice that a key is being generated in the rotation, and as we move it you can see it moving up and down, but it's not creating keys anywhere else on any other channel. Next up we've got existing. Now this is awesome. This is, well, to do this we actually have to create some keys. So if I make a movement and we are done, if we go to existing, now what happens is that if we make any other movements, no keys are going to be created. It's set up so that we can edit and modify only the existing keys and to not create any others. Okay, now let's get stuck into animating and creating this loopable walk cycle. First up, I'm going to grab the root controller and I'm just going to drop his whole body down. Next, I'm going to, using my middle mouse button, I'm going to highlight and select both of the feet controllers. I mean, alternatively you can just go in and select them both, or you can use one of the selection sets that we created for feet. Okay, now to start off with, we're going to move these legs in the Z, and I'm going to move them out to -20. Now I pretty much know most of these values because I've already done this, but what you want to do is you want to try to round off the numbers best as you can. I'm going to set that to 0. Okay, next thing, I'm going to go into the rotation, and I'm going to set the rotation for those feet controllers to -20, and back into moving, and I'm going to just move it up so that the very end of the heel is level with our ground, and then grab the root controller and just move that down a little bit more just to put a slight bend in the knee. Okay, so that's our first position. This is what's called a contact pose, I believe. Okay, well this is half of one anyway. So what we're doing is we're actually going to be creating a walk cycle by animating both feet and both arms at the same time and then offsetting them. Okay, so we've got our first part of our pose, and what we want to do now is we want to hit enter, and we want to create copy the key over to frame 40. Now you can see here I'm going to be creating keys for all the channels, and because I'm too lazy to go in individually, I'm going to do this and just clean up later. Okay, so now we've got key at 0 and 40. Now we'll move halfway down and grab our legs, and we're going to move them back to 10 centimeters, and we're going to rotate that 45, and we're going to go back into to move, and we're going to set that the Y to 0 so it's on the ground. Okay, we'll come back to frame 10, and once again we'll set the Y for position to 0, and let's move over to frame 30, and we'll lift those legs up. This is for our passing pose, and we'll rotate that. Oh, you can do this by eye actually, and just position it where you think it might fit nice. Okay, so what we're doing is we're coming up and we're back to the start again. Okay, we'll go to frame 5, and once again we'll set the Y for position to 0, and as it comes up, so now we've got our walk cycle. Okay, hopefully it's making sense now. The foot comes down, makes contact, stays along the ground. At frame 10, the rotation needs to be 0. Okay, so the foot comes down, frame 5, 0. So foot comes down, stays there, then from frame 10 to frame 20 the foot comes up. Okay, next we'll grab, using our selection sets, we'll grab our toes, and we'll just rotate them up at frame 0. You can do this by eye. As we come down to frame 5, we'll set that down to 0, and we'll come to 10, we'll hit enter, enter, just to create a key in there, because as we come up to frame 20 we're going to move it. Well, if we have a look at our foot, we've got it 45 degrees, so if we grab our toes again, we can make them 45 degrees, well, minus 45. It was inevitable I get that wrong. Okay, so now the foot comes down, stays along the ground, and then as it comes up the toes can form. And then for our passing pose, we'll grab our toes and we'll bend them down to create some of a dragging effect. Now you'll notice when we're at frame 40 that the toes are pointing down. Just go back to 0, hit enter, type in frame 40, and now we've copied it. So this is pretty much all the animating you do for the legs for the actual walk cycle. What we need to do now is we need to go in and clean up our paths. So this is where the graph editor comes in. So we'll bring up the graph editor. Oops. We'll just close that off and we'll grab the feet as well. I'm holding shift and I'm selecting both. Now I'll bring up the graph editor. Control up arrow, select them all. And I'm selecting them all now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the tension to 1 to ease in and out all the keys. But what it's going to do is it's going to actually mess up some of the keys, but we'll go in there and delete them. So I'm going to set it to 1. Oops, not 10, 1. And now I'm going to go in there individually. And as we go through, when nothing happens, that means that there's no curves or anything in there. So this one looks okay. You notice as it comes up from frame 5 till 10, it stays nice and flat all the way to frame 20. And then when it comes up here and comes forward, so we'll keep going through. Okay, that's pretty much the same. Don't need to worry about that. Now as you can see here, with our position Y, when it comes from frame 5 to frame 20, it's all nice and flat, and that's due to our tension being set to 1, otherwise it's all wonky like this. But there's an extra key in here that we don't need because there's nothing happening between these two, so we can just delete that. And that's pretty much what happens when we use, oh, get out of there, when we use auto key or when we copy the keys. So we'll go through again, and with the Z you can see that there's an extra key in there. We don't need that. We want a nice even path. Okay, now we'll leave this one as it is because this has got to do with the different rotations. Keep going through, checking. We're back to the position Z. We don't want that. And I think we are good to go. Okay, so if we grab those foot controls now, as we come down, comes up, you can clearly see that our path is all nice and clean and nice and smooth. Okay, so we've got that done. Now there's a little bit of a trick or a little bit of a formula to creating these walk cycles so that the feet stick to the ground as the character moves along. Now the two factors that come into play are the distance. If I select the feet controllers, you can see the distance is minus 20 centimeters with the front position, and as we go down to frame 20, the backmost position is 10 centimeters. So that whole path, that whole step there, travels 30 centimeters. Okay, so that's very, very important when we go to move our object or move our character. The other important factor is with the position Z for both. I'll just grab these foot controllers and refresh. Now with position Z for both of those feet, we've got this nice curve that eases in, gets to the end, and sort of eases out and then starts again. Well, that's no good for our loopable walk cycle. What that'll do is create a whole bunch of slipping and sliding. What we need to do is grab the first key and then shift click and grab the second key, and we need to set those two for both of the Z channels for position and change them to linear. So what that's saying is from the frontmost position to the backmost position, keep the speed perfectly linear so that there's no slowing down and speeding up and slowing down. Now on the way back, it doesn't really matter whether it's linear or whether it's smooth or not, because it's going to end up right at the start again. The important part is this first part here. Now you'll notice since we've changed it to linear, this curve here has gone all a bit wonky. If we go to the position Y and position Y for both of those, there's that extra key again, I'll just get rid of that. Now the first key for the position of these controllers, both in the Y, we select that and we make that 0 so that it's not easing in or easing out, and you'll notice that it's made the curve or the path nice and smooth leading into that flat bit. Okay, and that's it. That's the whole setup for the legs and for the feet to get our perfect walk cycle with our feet planted on the ground. But we're not done, obviously we're not done, there's still more to go. Next up we'll grab the root controller, and what we want to do is as the feet end up underneath him, his body is going to rise up. Okay, so you can just do that by eye until you get a nice position. It's up to you whether you want him all the way up or slouching. So now we've got him down and up. So what we can do now is we can copy the key from 0 to 20 to 40, hit enter, 20, hit enter, 40, move to frame 10 and copy that to frame 30. So now we're going down, up, down, up, down. Okay, and that's how the weight shifts as we go through our cycle. Okay, next up we'll take a look at animating those arms. So let's pick those arms and we'll just go ahead at frame 0 and just move them into position. Once again, just do this by eye. It's up to you how far you want the arms to move or how far you don't want them to move, but I'm just going to position them just like that. I'm going to hit enter and I'm going to copy that to frame 40, and I'm going to go to frame 20, grab those arms which are still selected, position them, rotate the hands and have a look. Okay, and then at frame 10 the arms are looking a little bit too straight, so we'll make that change and then copy that to frame 30. If we have a look at it, we've got our arms and our feet moving along. Now it's at this stage that we can offset the feet and the hand or one of the arms to create a walk, but I kind of like to do just a few more things in here. We can grab this controller here and go into rotation, and we can just position him up. As he takes his step, he's going to lean forward. We'll grab his head and just bring that back. Now with both of those controllers selected, let's copy those to frame 20 and 40. Okay, so when he comes up, we've got all those keys. Now we'll move to frame 10 and let's change. Let's bend him all the way back and bring his head forward, selecting both of those controllers, hit enter and copy that to frame 30. Now what we've done is we've got him bending forward when he takes a step. As he goes up, And there you go, you've got him going, bobbing up and down as he's walking along, and it's completely up to you how you create your pose for each one of these keys. The important thing is the feet, the linear movement of them, and the distance. Everything else is up to you. But this is as simple and as basic as it gets. What we'll do now is we'll offset the feet and that, and then we'll go in and just add a few more little bits to enhance the animation. So what we'll do is we'll go into our selection sets and we'll select offset. And that's the reason why we created this earlier, and you'll see exactly what happens when I bring up the graph editor. Select all of those channels, right click and select all of those keys. And now what we're going to do, and you can actually see when we're in modified mode that some keys were created when we copied them and some weren't when we actually manipulated them manually. Now what we're going to do, just zoom in a little bit and move the cursor to frame 20, and now that I've got the right foot, right toe and left hand selected and highlighted, I'm going to move them down by just sliding the frame across and matching up the first frame with frame 20. Now from 20 onwards we've got our walk cycle, but before that nothing's happening. So with all these selected, pre-behavior, repeat. If you want, you might as well just set it to repeat for post-behavior. We'll be doing that later anyway. Now I can get rid of the graph editor, and let's just deselect all this stuff and take a look at our walk cycle. And there it is, it's done. It's pretty simple, but like I said, the feet, and you'll see in a moment, stick to the ground perfectly. Now there's one thing about a loopable animation before we go in and do a few more tweaks, is that frame 40 and frame 0 are exactly the same. So what's actually happening as we get through down to 38, 39, it goes to 40, and then it goes back to 0. So it's repeating the same frame, okay? But for some reason, when you actually animate the character moving it forward, it doesn't mind that, particularly with MDD files. When we bake out our animation to our character, it actually kind of likes that extra frame. But it's up to you. If you're going to be animating in here, you could just simply change that to 39, and when you hit play, it skips that 40th frame and the animation works a little bit smoother. I'm just going to set that back. Now remembering that the duration of this walk cycle is 40 frames, we're going to change that in a bit. Well, actually, before I go in and do any more of the tweaks to the rest of the body, let's take a look at changing that. Select offset, okay, back to the graph editor. I'm going to select them all, hit A. They're all highlighted. I'm just going to grab them all and slide them back. Okay, so that's what's really good about this technique. We could always slide these keys back and go in and reanimate and change up things. Maybe make the steps shorter, more movement in the upper body or less. And when we bring the keys back and we've got everything grouped together, it's so much easier to move them all from to be exact. Now we'll just highlight everything once again, go to the graph editor, control up, hit A, and we're going to select all the keys. Now what we're doing is we're selecting each and every single key for each and every one of these controllers, and what we're going to do is now, rather than having a loop cycle at 40 frames, we'll make a loop cycle at 30 frames. Now to do that, with all our controllers selected, we hit H, which is stretch, and then we grab our cursor and place it right over the top of any one of these keyframes at 0. Hold down Control and drag left and right, and you'll notice now as I'm dragging, I'm looking at the far right keys, and when the far right key ends up at 30 right there. We're done. Okay, so I'll just change that timeline to 30 frames, and if we close this off and deselect, our animation is just that little bit quicker. Yet we haven't broken anything. We don't have to go in and adjust each leg individually. We don't have to adjust each arm individually. Just go back to our offset now, our offset selection set, back to the graph editor, grab them all, and now that our timeline is 30 frames long, halfway mark is 15, drag that across, close it up, deselect some stuff, and now we've got our loopable walk cycle with that extra frame, but now it's 30 frames long. Okay, so we'll stop that and we'll hit 1 for the front view. What I want to do now is just continue with some upper body animation to complement the rest of the walk cycle. So at frame 8 now, keeping in mind that we've moved over all our keys, so they're all going to be in different positions. Our markers no longer apply. But at frame 8, I'm going to move over. I'm going to move the body over to his left, our right, to be propped over the top of the leg that's actually making contact with the ground. Okay, so as we take a step, our body shifts over the balance to the leg that's holding us up. I'll move that. How far? Oh, maybe -1 centimeter. Okay, so if we take a look at 0, then as he takes the step, moves his body over to that leg and then comes back down to 0. Then at frame 23, we'll make that 1. We had -1. So now as he takes a step, his body is moving over the top of each leg that's making contact. Okay, next thing I want to do is go into bounding box mode, hit 2 on the keyboard. And if we have a look at the hip area here, I'll just double click on the bones. We've got these bones here that we're going to be animating. So now we've got that controller, and what that controller does is it wiggles his pelvis. Okay, so just undo that. Now we'll rotate it in the bank, and you can just eyeball this. I've done it before and I know it ends up at -20 degrees. As we go through, halfway through, we don't really have to do anything, but at frame 15 we'll make it 20. Okay, so if you see now, the back leg comes up to the front leg. So at frame 0 we've got 20 degrees, no need for a key halfway through because it just splits the difference, and back. And then once again we're going to have to copy frame 0 to 30. And now we've got the pelvis moving our legs back and forward. We can also go in and we can grab this controller here, and if we play with that, that's rotating our upper body. So let's take a look at that. As we've got the left arm back, what we want to do is rotate to sort of help out with that. We're going to bring the left shoulder back, and let's see how much degrees. -4. We don't really need that much. And then when we get to frame 15, it was 4 degrees. So if we're looking across here, looking across his shoulders, now his right arm goes back. And once again, we need to copy this key to frame 30 and make sure that it comes back, and it does. And there you go. Hopefully that made sense. Okay. Now since we've done that, since we rotated his upper body to help out, we've messed up the head. Now the head's been rotated. We can grab that controller and we can just adjust it until the eyes are facing forward. What's that, about 7 degrees? Like I said, I try to round it off so that when I create the next key, I'm not putting in 0.14765 or something stupid like that. So now it's 0, and then when it gets to 15, we're going to have to make that -7. Okay, so 7 -7, and we'll copy that to frame 30. Now we've got our head following along, and that is pretty much it. One other thing we can do, let's just grab that left arm controller, go to our graph editor, select it, and let's just hit A, grab all of them, and let's just move them back to the beginning. What I want to show you is how we can just create a bit of drag on the hands. So now as the hands come back, what we want them to do is, as the arms come back, we want the hands to be delayed slightly. So at about frame 5, we'll grab the hands, we'll make sure that we've got both of them, okay, and we'll just rotate them up. So what happens is, as the hand comes back, as the arm comes back, the hand's delayed slightly, and it creates a bit of drag. Don't worry about this offset, that's got to do with our spine and our hips. Okay, so now that when we get back up here to the end and we come forward once again, somewhere in between there, we'll just drag them back a little bit. Okay, so we've got to make sure that we copy those keys to frame 30. Now if we play it, you'll see the hands have actually got a little bit of drag happen, actually a lot of drag happening, just to help out with that motion. Now we need to grab that arm and hit G, A, select it all, and we want to move to frame 15 and slide them across. Now we've got our hands back where we need them. Okay, so now you can see there's a little bit more life in those hands. It's following along with the physics of how the arms would move. Okay, really quickly I'm just going to go into the display properties and I'm going to turn off show IK chains and targets just to get rid of some of the clutter. Now that we have our loop cycle completed, let's take a look at a really quick way to test how our feet are working out. Once again, scene editor, I'm going to go to the master null and I'm going to make it visible. And what I'm going to do first up is change it to position, make sure that we're at 0. Now like I said earlier, if we select the front foot, keeping in mind when we animated both feet were at the front, so it doesn't matter which one you pick, you'll notice in the Z it's -20 all the way from front to back to 10. So that's 30 centimeters distance. So to check this, what we'll do is we'll grab our master controller and we'll go to frame 15, which is 1/2 or is 1 step, and we'll move it -30 centimeters, the exact same distance as the foot traveled. Now if we play it back and just maximize this, take a closer look. As his body moves, the foot is planted perfectly on the ground. Now obviously the animation stops, so what we need to do is go to the graph editor for that master null and the position Z. You can see that it starts going forward and it just stops. For post behavior, we'll set it to offset repeat, and what that does is it just continues it on forever. Close that off. Now if we take a look, foot hits the ground, sticks perfectly, next foot comes down, okay, and we've got a perfect walk cycle in terms of its movement. The poses, well, that's up to you. And have a look at him. Well, let's increase the timeline. Ha! He's riding a skateboard. Well, the reason for that is we need to select all these objects except for the master null. Hit G, select all of our keyframes, and we'll just repeat for all of them, even though some of them aren't doing anything. But what we get now is we get our loopable walk cycle that will just continue on forever and ever and ever. Okay. Now, one other thing to add to this animation, if we select the character and we hit P for properties, let's close this off and go to deform, hit morph mixer, you'll notice that we've got a morph, and what that is just this guy blinking his eyes. Okay, so what we can do is we go through the timeline. Let's just bring it back to 30 frames, and we can just choose somewhere, this will do, and we can create a key, and with the right arrow we can 1, 2, 3, and we can create the blink, and then go 1, 2, 3 and set that back to 0, and now we've created a blink. Now if you want to move that around, we can select, hit the E for envelope, which pretty much opens up the graph editor, move him across. We can resize it. We could select these keys and say that we want to have him blink towards the start. We can just slide it across. Okay, and then he blinks at the start. Maybe you want him to blink a bit further down, so you can just go ahead and move that and change it, change the durations, change the amounts. Okay, but that's what you do. That's how you add a morph to an animation. It's completely separate to what else is happening here with the rig. If you've got facial expressions or anything like that, you can simply just go in and animate them. Okay, so that's our walk cycle. Now that we have our walk cycle completed, the next step would be to bake out our character to an MDD and then use that MDD in other projects. But we'll leave that for a little bit later. What I want to do now is just create a couple more cycles. I want to create a human run cycle, and I want to create a quadruped or animal walk cycle. There's a little bit of a trick in there as well. So when we complete the walk cycles, we'll come back and we'll look. We'll take a really good look at MDDs and how they work and what we can do with them. Okay, now let's take a look at creating a run cycle. Now what I've done is I've got 20 frames for our duration, and I've created markers at 5, 10, 15 and 20. Now if it ends up being a little too fast, we can always increase the duration to slow it down a little bit. Okay, first thing was just grab these knee controllers and move them up and out of the way, and in the display properties I've just turned off show target lines and IK. Now to start off with, we'll go to frame 5, and I want to just select the foot controllers and enter a key for them. Okay, and we'll grab our root control and we'll just bring it down a little bit, and we've got that there. Let's just copy that to frame 15. Now we'll go to frame 0, and I'm going to grab that root control and lift it up and copy that to frame 10, frame 20. Now what we've done is we've got the body bouncing up and down. Now we'll grab those keys. This is our contact pose at frame 5, and it'll be at frame 15 as well. So now that we've got a key at 5, let's go back to 0 and grab those legs and position them up. And this is entirely up to you how you position these legs for a run cycle, but I think it's somewhere around there. So when it comes down, it makes contact, and we go to frame 10. Just drag those legs back up, rotate. Okay, yeah, something like that, that'll do. As we come up at frame 15, we'll just bring them back down. Oops, like so, and back to frame 0 and copy it to frame 20. If we have a look now, we've got our run cycle. Now that might be a little bit quick, but it looks correct when both legs are moving independently. Okay, so I'm going to grab the toes now. While we're here, we'll grab our toes and we'll rotate them a little bit. Back to 5. We'll put them back to 0. Up at 10. We'll continue on, and then when we get to 15, we'll create that drag. Okay, and then copy that to frame 20. Okay, let's have a look at that. Alrighty. Now while we're here, let's grab our feet and our toes and go to the graph editor, select them all, hit A. Now for this, all I'm going to do is select the keys at 0, hold shift, select the keys at frame 20, and ease in and ease out for those. I'm not going to worry with the rest of the stuff that's in the middle there. Okay, so we've got that part done. Now what we can do is we can actually get in here before we mess around with the arms and position our body. Have him, let's just say, have him leaning forward during the stride. When he comes to the ground, we can level him out a little bit. Like I said, these poses are totally up to you. This is just to give you an idea. Now that we've got to select those two, we'll copy those keys to 10 and 20. We'll go to frame 5 and copy that to frame 15. Okay, so just got a bit of a lean forward as he runs. Okay, let's now take a look at the arms. So we've got the arms selected. Now let's move them into position, something like this, closer to the body and a little bit higher up towards the head. Okay, and we'll go to frame 10 and we'll bring it back up, something like that. Okay, frame 5, we'll bring them down and I'll copy that to frame 15, copy that to frame 20. Okay, now we've got the arms. We can add in a little bit of drag as it comes down, and when it comes back the other way, we'll add a little bit of drag there. Okay. Okay, now that we've got this part of it done, I think we're ready to do our offset. But it's probably at this stage right here that you can go in and alter the length of the timeline to maybe slow down the run a little bit. That's up to you. I'm going to go in and we'll grab our offset. Now before we do that, I'm going to grab those arms and go into the graph editor and just clean them up a little bit. Okay. Now we'll grab our offset. Go to the graph editor, select them all. Now we want to go to frame 10, slide them across, and repeat, and hopefully all is working perfectly. Now let's have a look at it. It's a little bit hard to see with all this. And there we have our run cycle. Now when it comes to actually moving this guy along, it works a little bit different. Having a look at the distance that the feet travel doesn't really come into play. It's more of a judging it by eye. I think when we get to frame 10, let's just move it -1 meter. Oops, because I'm in centimeters. That might be a little bit too far, maybe not. Anyway, have a bit of a play with that part of it to see how far he might travel. You can see the foot makes contact, it stays on the ground long enough for the body to pass. We've got our contact pose and we've got our strides. Like I said, these poses are entirely up to you. This is close enough to a run. So there you go, that's how you create a run cycle. Now let's take a look at creating a quadruped or an animal walk cycle. Now first up, let's take a look at the selection sets that I've created. First up, I've got the front legs, you can see it down here. Next I've got the back legs, I've got the front toes, and I've got the back toes. Underneath that I've got legs, toes, cleanup, and what I do is I use this to go into the graph editor and set up all the tensions to clean up the animation. Under that I've got offset 1, and what that is the right front leg, right back leg, right front toe, and right back toes, and we use that to create our first offset. And underneath that I've got offset 2, which is the back legs and back toes, and we use that to create our second offset. Now to speed things up, what I've done is I've created the first part of the animation. Okay, if we take a look at the front feet, I've moved them, both the front and the rear feet, I've moved them forward 1 meter, and when we get to frame 20 I've moved them back 1 meter. Okay, now this particular walk cycle has got a slight difference to the biped walk cycle. If you recall, from frame 10 to frame 20 we had the biped feet start rotating. In this case what I've done is I've extended it another 5 frames. From frame 15 to frame 20 we get that rotation. That's the only difference. Okay, let's take a look at finishing off this animation. We'll get our selection sets up, and I'm going to select offset 1. Okay, I'm going to bring up our graph editor and control up arrow. I'm going to select all of them and I'm going to move to frame 20, and I'm going to move all those keys over. Okay, and I've got it set to repeat. Close that off. Let's take a look at that. Okay, that's a pretty good start to a walk cycle. You're probably looking at that and thinking, well, there's the walk cycle completed. But that's not the case. If you have a good look at how an animal walks, you'll notice that there's always 3 feet making contact with the ground at any given point. So to achieve that, what we do is select our offset 2, bring up our graph editor, once again control up arrow, select them all. So what we want to do is we want to move the keys until we get the rear legs in this position here. So we'll grab them and we'll move them back, and we'll move them back 5 frames. Okay, so now if we close off our graph editor, now you'll notice that there's 3 feet making contact with the ground at any given point. Okay, now let's take a look at creating a quadruped or animal run cycle. And once again, I've gone ahead and created the major poses. And these poses are exactly the same as in the biped run cycle. Okay, the feet come down, touch the ground and come up, and then go back to the start. Okay, so let's go ahead and set up the offsets. First up, we'll select offset 1. And bring up the graph editor, select all the keys. Now this time we only want to offset the keys by 5 frames going forward. Okay, and we'll set it to repeat. And if I close that off now, okay, that's the first part done. Now what we want to do is grab our second offset, bring up the graph editor. Once again, I'll move this across and we'll select all the keys. And this time what we want to do is we want to offset the keys back 5 frames. Okay, so we close that off. If we play that back, you'll notice now that the rear legs come up a little earlier, make contact with the ground first, then followed by the front legs. Okay, so that's pretty much how we set up the run cycle. But what I'll do now is I'll go ahead and just animate a few other parts of the body. As you can see, I've just resized the controllers by going into the item properties, just so I can select them a little bit easier. And what I've done is I've just selected a controller that rotates his bum. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to rotate his bum in maybe about 7 degrees in the what's that, 8 degrees in the pitch. Okay, and then when we get to frame 20, when the legs are all the way out, we'll bring that up and we'll go back minus 8 degrees. Okay, and we want to copy the key 0 to frame 40. Now if we take a look at it, you can see that the bum's moving in with the rear legs. Okay, it looks as though these rear legs need to have the repeat set on them. And there we go, now we've got the bum moving in with the rear legs. Now what we need to do is just fix up that tail, so I'm just going to rotate it up to make it level at frame 0, copy that to frame 40. When we get to frame 20, I'm just going to bring it back down to level it out, and we should be good. Okay, next up I want to grab the root control, and currently at frame 0 we're minus 18 centimeters. At frame 20 I'm going to make that 0, which moves it up. Come back to frame 0, copy that to frame 40. And now if we have a look, we've got some movement in the body as well as the bum and the tail. And lastly, we can finish it off just by adding some small amount of animation to the head. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try to keep the head in between these two lines here. Move to frame 0. Let's give it a key. Move to frame 20. And I'll just move it down a little bit. And we'll go back and copy that to frame 40. And now we've got pretty much the whole body animated with our quadruped animal run cycle. Here's just another example of a quadruped or animal run cycle. This is a horse with a horse gallop. Okay, what I've done is I've created this rig and saved it out as a preset, and I'll make that available. It's a little bit of a work in progress, but It's the quickest and easiest horse gallop I've ever created, using the same techniques you just saw. Now that we have our animations created, what we can do is we can load in a variation of this character and have this rig drive that character. If I bring up my scene editor, what I've done is I've loaded in a variation. I'll just turn off the original. Let's take a look at it in Modeler. What I've done is I've just selected some of the points and I've scaled them up, and I've added a hat and just changed some of the colors. What you need to keep in mind is that this character still has the same weight maps and it fits within the rig that we created for the original puppet. So if we go back into layout, what we can do is we can go in here and we can select our puppet character, and we select bones and go to the bone properties. And what we can do is we can tell our modified character to use the bones from the puppet rigged. And now if we press play, you'll see that our variation of our character is now moving along with the rig for our original puppet. And the great thing about it is that we can reset our offsets and edit our animation, and no one said the arms had to move. We've all seen this pose, people walking down the street on their phones. Now another way to swap out your character is to simply, let me just pause this. I'm going to select this character, which is called Puppet Fat, and I'm going to change it back to the original or any other variation that you might create. Simply just go up to items, replace with object, and select your variation, hit open, and now we've got our animation with our new character. Okay, now let's take a look at creating MDDs. Now an MDD is a motion file. MDD stands for Motion Designer Data, and the way it works is the MDD records or bakes the position of all the vertices or the points in your 3D object for every frame, and creates a file that we can reuse to drive our animations without any bones or rigs. Now with our object selected, if we hit the properties for that object and we go to deform, under add displacement we go down to MD Baker. If we double click on that, what we can do is we can select the destination to save our file. Now you'll notice that the naming of the file is the same as the object. Now that comes in handy when you're looking for your files. Alternatively, you can name this whatever you like. In this case I'll just underscore walk, and we just hit save. Now we want to designate the amount of frames for this MDD. In this case it's 40 frames, and like I said earlier, you don't really need to go to 39. MDDs don't really mind that 40th frame. So with all that done, we don't really need to change anything else. Just make sure it's set to MDD and hit OK, and you'll notice the playback head zooms across the timeline. Our MDD now has been created. So what we can now do, if I close this off, we can load in our character again, and if we hit P for properties and under deform and add displacement, we can now select MD Reader. Okay, now this actually reads that MDD file that we just created. Now if we double click on that, I'm going to close this off, and we go ahead and find that file, hit open. Now it's going to prompt us to set the subdivision order to last, and we hit OK. Now just so you know what that is, if I hit the properties and go to geometry, here where it says subdivision order, if I set it to first, you can notice our character goes to its default position. So we need to set it to last. Now let's just take a look at a few of these settings. Okay, now frame offset, we'll have a look at that in a second. The replay speed, well that's pretty obvious if you want it to play at 100% or if you want to slow it down at 50%. But keep in mind, when you increase or decrease the replay speed, it's going to affect the distance that your object's going to travel. So just make sure that if you decrease it by 50%, that you now need to decrease the distance that your character walks over that amount of time. We'll have another look at that in a sec. End behavior, well, stop, we'll play it and then just finish. Let's just give it some more frames. Now you'll notice that I've got the original one over the top. So what we'll do before we go to that, we'll go over here to where it says apply cache to. Now world space, what that does is it puts the character right in the middle, or right where it was recorded. Now if I grab the actual character and try to move him around, you notice that our controller moves around but the object doesn't. If we switch that to object space, now we can move the character around to wherever we like. Okay, now if we go back to this end behavior, let's have a look at stop. When it plays through, at the end of the 40 frames it stops. Okay, comp is pretty much the same, except when it finishes it ends up at the default position. Ping pong plays forward, then plays back, and then plays forward. Okay, so if you want something bouncing up and down and you want it to just continually bounce up and down, you just set it to ping pong. Generally we just set it to loop and it just keeps playing forever. Okay, now as far as the other settings go, point order, we'll leave it at that. I'll show you something else about that in a minute when it comes to coordinates. If we put it on coordinates it'll still work, but this will come in handy a little bit later. And like I said, as far as the rest, I'll leave them as they are and we'll hit continue. But before we do, let's take a look at frame offset. And this comes in very, very handy. What we can do is I'll hit continue and I'll create another copy of this, so we can just create as many copies as we like. What we can do is we hit P for each one of these objects and we go into our MD reader with the frame offset. Well, these walk cycles are 40 frames long, so we've got 40 frames in which to play with. So I'm just going to offset it by, let's just say 5 frames, and you'll notice now that this character here on the left is going to start at 5 frames, so that they don't look like marching robots. Okay, and hit continue. We can select this guy over here, same thing, hit the properties, MD reader, and just offset him by, oh, I don't know, say 15, and hit continue. And now we've got all 3 of these guys walking with their individual walk cycles. Like I said earlier, we can play around with the speed. Let's hit properties again, bring up our MD reader. Now we can play around with our replay speed. Like I said earlier, what we can do is we can scale up our characters. Let's just go to scale and do 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. Now that we've scaled him down to half his size, in order for him to keep up with the rest of them, you can see that his feet aren't moving as fast. If we set it to 200%, since we halved the size, we need to double the speed. And now you can see that he's taking a whole bunch of smaller, quicker steps to keep up. Now if we were to move these characters, they'd be moving correctly. Okay, and alternatively, if we scale him up to double his size, we can lower the speed to 50%, and now all 3 of these guys will be moving at the same speed. Here are some examples of the different scales. You notice that they all move together. And here's one with some varying frame durations. You can see 24 frames run, 24 frames walk, 32 frames, 40, 50. Now there's a few things that you need to know about working with MDDs. Now as I said earlier, an MDD records the position of all the points of your object at every frame. Okay, now if we were to go ahead and make any changes to our mesh, remove any points, the MDD will be looking for these particular points and won't be able to find them. Okay, so let's take a look at what would happen. What I've done is I've just created a second version of this character here, because when I do this, it's pretty much going to destroy it. When I say destroy it, it's going to destroy it working with our MDD. What I'll do is I'll just select these 2 polygons and I'll do a band glue. Okay, so what I've done is I've just removed a whole bunch of points from the top of the head. I'll hit save, go back into layout, what you'll notice immediately is that the MDD freaks out and our mesh goes wild. Okay, if I hit properties and I turn that off, you can see that we've got our character now with all the points removed on their head. Now what I found with this object, once you edit it and if you go back and undo it and save it, it doesn't fix it. But as I mentioned before, here it's got match by, if we select coordinates, all of a sudden it's working. Our cone head that we've edited is working. Okay, and it'll continue to work like this. But if I go back in here and hit Control Z and hit save and come back in here, well, we're still working in the coordinate mode, but if I go back to point order and hit continue, it doesn't fix it. One other important thing to keep in mind is if we turn off the MDD reader and we go into modeler, and I'm going to Shift H and scale this guy up and save it. But check this out, if we now turn the MDD on that we created for this object here on the left, you'll notice now that it goes straight back to how it was recorded, because like I said earlier, it's recording the position of all the points of your object. Now with the MDD off, the position are all over the place because we've scaled it up, but when we turn it on, it's reverting back to what it was recorded at. So when you're using MDDs, it's super important not to edit your object. Make sure that you're happy with the final object before you go ahead and create your MDDs, because if down the track you decide that you want to edit these objects, you won't be able to use those MDD files. Okay, next up, let's take a look at a stretch rig. This is a Genoma rig preset that I've created that I'm going to make available. Now what I've done is I've added it to this character. If I press play, just created this little animation. Doing. Okay, comes out, stretches out, and comes back in. Now let's take a look at the rig. Okay, what I've done is if we go into Genoma presets and shoot presets, like I said, I'm going to make this available as well as the horse rig. And there's the horse rig, so I'll make that available. And if we go down the bottom, stretch limbs full rig. Okay, you can load that in and take a look at it. So I went ahead and I split the base bone. Well, I detached the base bone from the rest of the arm, and I included a single FK controller. Okay, and I also did the same for the legs. Okay, this is the base bone here for the leg. I detached it, I moved it up, and I added that, and we'll take a look how to make that in a second. Let's go back into layout and have a look at the rig. Now if I grab the root control and move it around, you'll notice that it's working correctly. If I rotate it, okay, move the controllers, everything's working correctly. Okay, now what you'll find is that we've got 4 extra controllers here. Now these are the controllers that are from the single FK controller, and what we can do with those is we can use them to animate our stretch. Okay, so I'm just going to grab, I'll turn auto key on, and let's just move up. I'm going to grab the root control and I'll just move that up. Okay, now I'm just going to grab the hand control, bring that out, and let's just grab these feet and move them out. Now what we can do is we can start stretching stuff. And the way we stretch stuff is that we just simply grab any one of these controllers, other than the arm and feet controllers, and we can move them about. Now with regards to these 4 controllers, I've just turned off the X and the Y, and we're only going to be animating in the Z. But the great thing about these controllers is you'll notice by default, if you look down here in the left hand corner, they're set to 0 rotation. So if we make a change by grabbing one of these controllers and stretching it out, you'll notice that if we just set it back to 0, we're back to the default position. Okay, so that's what's really good about having these controllers in here. We don't actually have to select any bones or move bones. We can do all our stretching by using these controllers and animating. And what we do is we just simply grab it and drag it across till it meets up with the arm controller, and then if we continue on, we start getting the IK. Okay, grab this one, stretch it out. Now it's probably a really good idea to create some very specific weight maps for when you do the stretching. In this case, I've just got some simple weight maps for the arms, body and leg. What we can do is just grab any one of these controllers and stretch it up. But the brilliant thing about this is that the rig continues to work as it should, and we can do the same with the legs. We can just grab them and stretch them down, and once they reach a certain point, the IK starts to kick in. We'll grab our knee controllers and we move them around, so we can animate however we like, and we still get all of our IK working. Okay, so there we have it. So we've just moved up the timeline, we've stretched our character out, and now we've got a really simple animation. If we move back down, we can just select all these and just type in 0, and now they go all the way back to the default position. So check out that rig. Like I said, it's going to be available for download, and have a go with it. If you want, you can download Elastigirl. The rig should just fit straight into her, and have a bit of a play. Okay, let's take a look at creating one of those stretch limbs. First up, we'll just go in and we'll grab one of the legs, leg foot, hit OK, deselect that, and I'm going to grab FK control, single FK control B, hit OK. So first of all, what I did was I selected this base bone here, and I just did Control X, Control V, and grabbed my drag tool and just drag that bone up. Okay, then I've grabbed the FK control, positioned it, scaled it up, and I welded those 2 points together, but it's gone crazy. Now the trick for it to work, if we've got these 2 points selected, I'll just move it out here. For it to work, we need to weld the tip of this blue bone to this junction right here. Normally when we're using an FK controller, we're welding to the tip of this yellow controller. If you do that, it won't work. So we'll just select that point, and we'll select that point there, and we'll weld them. And I'm just going to leave this one sticking out like that. Okay, we'll grab our controller and we'll move that up there like so. Okay, we'll save this out. Okay, here we are in layout, and if I select the leg control, you can see that we've got full control of the leg. And if we grab that controller now, oops, and move it in the Z, not in the X, you can see that we've got our leg working and we've got our stretch happening. Now to finish off this tutorial, what I want to do is go over my production workflow. Okay, I've got a scene here that I created for a client, and I want to go over how I went about creating this. The scene's got some animation, it's got some morphing, it's also got the picking up of the handset. Okay, so let's take a look how I went about doing this. First up, what I did was I created my master scene. Okay, I've got my character in there as the reference for the scale, and I set up the rest of the scene, moved everything into position. I've got it all set up with my lighting, all my textures, and all my objects. This is my master scene. Next up, what I do is I load in my main character and I create the rig. I set it all up, set up all my controllers, save this scene out as my master character. Next up, I make a copy of the master scene and remove all the objects that don't interact with the character or the character's animation, and save that out. Then what I do is go into File, Load Items from Scene, select my master character and hit OK. And now that brings in my rigged character ready to go. The next thing I do is I position him in place, and here we are now with my finished scene. As you can see, I've got my animation here, and you can also see that the character is interacting with the mouse, and we're also interacting with that handset as well as the desk. The keyboard's there as a reference. We've got the base of the chair, and we've got the seat, and we've got the backrest. Now the base of the chair is parented to this master null, and if we move that around, you can see our character moves around and the chair moves around with him. So this is my animation scene. Now once I'm done with the animation, under deform, you'll see that I've got morphs. Now all these morphs relate to all the different expressions that I've created for this character. And what I've simply done is I've animated these morphs to come on, stay on for a little bit, and as one fades off, another one kicks in. So that's how we go about including morphs with our animation. So you just finish off your animation. Once you're done with all the different movements, you can go in and start animating your facial expressions. So once I'm done in here, what I then do is I select my character and all the parts of the chair, the handset and the mouse. And if we go over to in out, we can go into MD multi-baker, and once again we can select the destination, and what it'll do is it'll create an MD file for each one of these individual objects. So what I then do is once again make another copy of the master scene, and this time I've removed some of the objects that get in the way of the camera. If we go into the camera view, you can see this is what the final shot is, and I've got my character selected. And if I hit properties, if I turn on the MDD, we'll go back into the camera view, and now I've got my animation in there, I've got my cameras set up, I've got my whole scene set up, and I can just render it out. Okay, to finish off this tutorial, here we are in my animation scene. What I want to do is I want to show you how we can go ahead and pick objects up and put them down. And the way we do that is we use a tool called the parenter. Now to do this, we need to select the object that we want to be parented, or the object that we want to be picked up and put down. Now in this animation I've got some markers in here. My character grabs the handset at frame 86, holds it up to his head, and then lets it go at frame 177. Now we've got the handset selected, and what we'll do is we'll hit M for motion options, and if we go to add modifier and we move down, we can select parenter. Okay, double click on that and we'll close off this window. Now what we do is we move to the frame that we want to pick up this object or parent it, and we select the object that we want to parent it to. In this case I'm just going to parent it to the ARM controller and simply hit parent. It's going to ask us what we want to parent it to. In this case I've selected the controller, and I'm going to leave keep initial position, initial rotation and scale, and hit OK. And then as we move on, you'll notice that he picks up the phone. Okay, and then when we get to frame 177, I'm just going to click unparent, and he lets go. It's as simple as that. Reaches over, picks it up, has a chat, puts it down and lets it go. Probably could have let it go a little bit earlier. Okay, so that's how you pick up and put down objects here in Lightwave. So once again, I hope it's helped, and I'll see you next time.